Hi, everyone. Thanks for connecting to this online session. Thanks to the Scottish Summit organizers too for letting me be part of this. And now let's go. Let's not forget about our sponsors, without whom none of this would be possible. So let me name them one by one. We have Proxima 3, Low Codera, Riata, and Cubics. Right, the amount of effort that goes into organizing one of these events is tremendous. So without the help of these sponsors, none of this would be possible. So a big thank you to all of them. So allow me to briefly introduce myself. My name is Christian Fernandez, but my friends call me Cris. I am happily connecting today from Spain in a city called Tarragona. It's near Barcelona. I've been doing software development for longer than I care to admit. By the way, here XP means experience points for those of you who are into D&D. I've been doing Power Platform development since the version CRM version 4. That was a long time ago in a galaxy far away. Lately, I was lucky enough to get the Microsoft MVP recognition for my work in the community. I am also the founder of Creativity Spark, a Microsoft partner specialized in Power Platform solutions. If you want to know anything else about me or need help with anything, don't hesitate to contact me on social networks. You have my details here in the QR code or in the bio link. And without any further ado, let's move on to the topic. All right. So today I want to talk to you about how we can use the capabilities of Power Platform to automate and extend Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps is a fantastic tool for software project lifecycle management, and it comes with millions of very useful features, including things like project requirements management, source control, a wiki that you can use to write documentation. It allows creating, automating building and deployment pipelines and dozens of other features. So the list is so long that I won't have enough time to go through everything. So this tool has been around for ages, and it became pretty much the standard in the industry for Microsoft Stack projects. And the most important thing, and the thing that we like the most about the tool, it is that it's extensible from different angles. In the other side of the picture, we have the Power Platform, which has a ton of features to allow extending other systems. What I want to show you today is how you can connect the two, leverage the extensibility from Azure DevOps, and use the Power Platform tools to automate and simplify part of the manual and repetitive tasks that we probably have to go through every day in the software development projects. I will only show you 3 examples. I don't have time for more, and I hope these examples spark your ideas, and hopefully you can come up with your own solutions. After all, every project is different and has a unique set of needs. I am more than happy to share any of these examples that you will see here today. If you want them, please ping me on social media or send me an email, and I will reply. Okay. So let's begin with those examples and demos, right? How can we introduce this, right? So DevOps is a fantastic tool, no doubt about it, right? But sometimes, as a project member, right, as a person working in a software project, I find it too generic, right? I wish I could automate my tasks somehow. For example, when I create a user requirement, a user story, I would like to send it for approval. And I don't want to be exporting my user story to a document, paste it in an email, send it for an approval. What if instead I can kick a flow that does the work for me and, for example, creates a Power Automate approvals? How can we do that? Okay, so let me jump into the examples and the demos here. So what I have here is an Azure DevOps instance, and I have here the normal backlog that any project in DevOps would have. And I have my epics, my features. If I keep expanding this, I see my user stories, right? What if I could create a Power Automate flow that whenever I create a user story and I change the status, for example, to approval requested, it triggers a flow, and it goes and does this business of sending an approval request, right? Wouldn't be that great. So I can do that by going to my solution, any solution that you have in your environment, or even opening directly Power Automate and creating a new Cloudflow type automator, right? And there, it turns out there is a trigger already for this. So I can search for DevOps, right? And I can see there are multiple triggers for Azure DevOps. And one of them is when a work item is created. So whenever I create a new work item, and a work item is any record, any type of epic feature, user story, task, or even a bug in DevOps, whenever I create one of those, I want to trigger a flow. Also, I have another one called when a work item is updated, and it's similar, right? So whenever I make a change in an existing user story, for example, this flow will be triggered. So this is what this trigger looks like. I can, for example, well, the first thing that is asking me here is please select your organization. I can just use the drop down there to select the right value, and then the project that it belongs to. That's the only project that I have available. If I had more, this drop down would show the list. And I have other options here, other type of values that will act as filters. So I don't get to trigger this flow on every change. Only for example, when my my work item is a user story. So I can come here and select and say, dear flow, please be triggered only when a user story is created. I can also provide things like area path, or who created it, or the priority that will act as effectively as a filter to when to trigger this flow. So now that I have my trigger, the next thing will be to say, okay, please go and use the approvals activity, right? And I can start and wait for an approval. And I can just complete. This is a normal Power Automate approvals, right? Is creating a connection now for this, and I can start populating all of the parameters or the inputs that the approvals is asking me. So, for example, the approval type, I can say just approve or reject, and the first to respond. And after selecting this, a few fields will appear here underneath. Yeah, there it is. So please approve this user story. I can start populating these fields, and I can assign this to maybe one of my users. I can make this dynamic as well. That won't be a problem. And I can do things like maybe including the link of the user story that I want this user to approve, right? How can I include the link? So, for example, I can go here to my user story, and I can control click on this one and copy the URL that I have in here, and I will make the last part. We can see how the last part contains the ID of the user story, and I will replace that with a variable, right? So I'll go back here to my approvals, paste my link, and remove the 3 and put it as a parameter and complete it with the ID from the trigger. Right, and that's it really. And after this flow is executed, the next thing that I want to do is, in case it is approved, I would like to call again the Azure DevOps connector and maybe change the status from approval requested to active. I think it's the next status that we have in here. So approval requested and active. So how do we do that? I can go back to my flow and select, for example, Azure DevOps as the connector. And again, I have a full list of all the different activities that are available for us within the Azure DevOps connector. I don't have an activity for every single type of things that I can do with it, but here we have a generic HTTP request that I can use, and actually we will see how this work and how we can leverage. But for now, all I need is to basically update, if I find it, update work item. There you go. Okay, so I change the status of my user story. I send an approval, and now I want to change the status to active. I, again, one more time, select the organization name. I can select the project as well. And here, I will just use the value that I already have somewhere here, the ID of the work item. And as soon as I get the approval approved, I will be updating my my user story back to change it to what I will change. I need to change the status. I expand this to see the full list of all the fields that are available in my user story. I don't see the status, but doesn't matter. I can just come over here and say status equals to, we were saying active, yeah? So we're here, active. And that should be it. I'm changing back the status. I'm changing the status of the user story that triggered this flow to active. So this is how we operate. Like this is the simple way of operating with triggers from that are, triggers that are kicked when something happens in DevOps. There are generic triggers. There are activities that I can use to make changes back into my DevOps instance. So let me save this. I will just call it test one. Okay, saving this. Actually, I forgot to update something. The trigger itself comes with multiple options, including one for deciding how often I want to trigger this flow. And the default value, yeah, I'm getting an error there. The default value here, if I expand this, I will go here to these settings. Yeah, and I'm not seeing the options for the trigger here. But let me take a look at this error. So basically, it's saying I'm not finding the type of work item that we are trying to update, right? So this activity here is failing, and what it's complaining about is that it doesn't really know what type of work item I want to update. So all I need to do here is come over here and select user story, because I know that what triggered my flow is a user story. So I will be updating a user story again. I can make this value variable or use a variable to define this as well if needed. So if I go and save this, now it should save without issues. And now, after a few seconds, this is saved. And if I can go and test it, yeah. So I can come over here. I have my user story. Let me open it again. So I'm here in the user story. I can control click on it. That will open a new user story. I will change the status to approval requested, save it. And if everything goes well, I should see, and let me go back here to the summary page, a new execution of this flow that will have that would have been triggered. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. Actually, when I was editing this the other day, I was doing it through the new editor, which for some reason is not available here. And it was showing me here the options to how often I wanted this to be triggered. But I'm not seeing it for whatever reason. So if I go back here one more time and I check the cloud flows and test one, and I check the details, I will see that this flow has been triggered, in fact. And if I go and open it, I will see how probably is waiting for the approval to be accepted. So if I go check my email now, I have my email open in here. So let me refresh it. Not sure if this is the latest one, but should be. I have here, please approve this user story. And I have, no, this is the new one arriving. Please approve this user story. And I have the two options, and I have the link as well to the work item. So if I just click on it, that will bring up my my user story, the user story that needs to be approved. And from here, I can just go and submit. And that will make my flow to continue if everything goes well. And after a while, it failed, right? So probably something went wrong here. I don't know. Yeah, so the status field wasn't set up properly. I can go and try to fix it, or I can just, it's actually state, right? That's the name of the field. I wrote that wrongly, but if I go and expand this and I change it from status to state and I retest this, they should work this time. Okay. So I will get another email this time with a new approval. I will go and check my email over here. I will get that approval request. I'll accept it. And if everything goes well, the flow should have been completed and the work item should have been updated. All right. Give this a few more seconds to run and see how it goes. So still waiting there for the approval and completed successfully. So if I go now and refresh this user story, I will see how it changed to active now. Okay, so this is the bare minimum example on how I can connect Azure DevOps and Power Automate to do things with it. So there are so many tasks in daily, day-to-day project that you might need to do. Just requesting for an approval is one small example, but there's way more things that you can do. For example, exporting this user story to a document and maybe sending it. You can make this flow as complicated as you want. Obviously, you need to kind of create logic there to check about the current status before sending the approval, and afterwards you need to check if in fact it was approved and change the status back of the user story accordingly. So this is just a very simple example, right? So another way that we can connect to Power Automate, right, from Azure DevOps is through the endpoints, right? So let me go back here to Azure DevOps, and if I go here to my organization settings, right? Sorry, my project settings. Go to project settings, and I have here something called the service hooks. So the service hooks are one thing that I can configure in my project to tell Azure DevOps, hey, DevOps, whenever something happens inside this system, please call this or this URL or this service or this API that is hosted somewhere else. So how can we use this to leverage and to start building flows that react to events that happen in DevOps? So all we need is basically go back to our flow designer and create a new flow. But this time we use the HTTP trigger. So if I go and search here and I type in HTTP, oops. Okay. HTTP. What am I doing wrong here? Let me start again. So add new automation, Cloudflow automated. And now I will go and search for HTTP connection. Okay. It's not showing here. I will just keep it for now. And then go and select the flows. So I will search one more time, HTTP trigger. I have the request, okay? And from here, I can select the option to when an HTTP request is received. And I can save this flow. This will give me a URL that I can then link and provide to this configuration in the service hooks in Azure DevOps. So what does this setting look like? For example, I can click on New and go here to Webhooks and click on Next. Here, I have the option, right, to select the event that will execute, will trigger that flow. I have many of them. For example, I have the work item updated, which is something that we just checked with the default or the other native trigger. I have more filtered in here, and what I have in the next step, right, is the URL that I need to call whenever I want this endpoint to be notified about this event. So I can come and paste the URL here and then click on test and finish, right? And that will be it. That will be the setup for this, right? If I double click and check here an existing trigger that I already have configured, I can click on next. I can see how I set it up to whenever a work item is created, right? I can click on next now. I have here the URL of the flow. This is an existing flow. So let me show you what this flow look like. If I go here to my solution, this is the flow that I have created for this purpose. Send Teams message, right? I have it in here. So it's an HTTP trigger that has this URL. I copied this URL and pasted it in here. I left everything the way it is with the default values. I went and clicked on the test button, right? And then click on the finish. And that's how simple it is to set this up, okay? So I can cancel now this and show you the effect, right? So, and let me very quickly go through this flow, right? The flow is just it only has this HTTP trigger, and all I'm doing at the end, right, is calculating. Well, I have some compose actions in here to calculate things like the URL of the work item that triggered this flow. And at the end, I'm posting a message into a Teams channel, right? If I remember correctly, this flow is off, right? So let me turn it on before doing the demo. So I'll go back here. And in fact, this is off. I'll turn it on. And now if I go right to my DevOps instance and I create any work item anywhere, for example, I have here my feature and I want to include a new user story. So there's going to be a Scottish Summit demo. All right, I can go and save this one. And this will be triggering that endpoint, which in fact, it is this flow that I have over here. And if I refresh here the run history, I can see how it was executed 2 seconds ago. And the interesting thing about this trigger and this method of connecting to DevOps or connecting Power Automate and DevOps is that it's a very generic and open way, which means essentially that I can reuse the same flow for multiple projects, multiple even instances of DevOps, and yeah, you can essentially create generic flows, which with the other way of working you can't, because the trigger itself contains information like the project or the instance, the organization where that DevOps instance is hosted. So in this trigger you have pretty much everything about the flow that was, sorry, the user story that was executed. You have information like the fields that were changed, the values of all the fields, the relationship with other DevOps, the other with other work items, the links to access them, everything that you need to perform pretty much any action you want, right? In this example, all I'm doing is to post a message in a Teams channel. So if I go here to my Teams, I can see how a couple of minutes ago, the user story number 16 was created by me in this area, and the status is new, right? And this is very useful. I use this in my projects to have one generic Teams chat per project, and I reuse the same flow over and over again throughout different projects without having to need to modify or to tweak any of the trigger properties. So very useful in this case. So that's the example number one. Okay, done. Example number two now. Right. How about integrating Azure DevOps with Outlook? Right. So one thing that I noticed when I am managing my requirements is that there is a lot of emailing around the decisions that are made around the scope, or simply discussions that basically I end up copying and pasting in my requirements. So many times as well, I go and take an email from Outlook, I save it, and I add it as an attachment, kind of like a proof that a decision was made around one requirement. Sometimes I want to share information with the developer and I want to attach it to the work item itself, the task in DevOps. Wouldn't be great if I can let Power Automate and Outlook to handle all of this extra work for me. So let's see how we can do this. Okay, so then again, we're going to leverage the use of Power Automate and DevOps for this. So how do we do it? Let me go to my app maker again. Okay, so what I have in my solution over here is I have a flow. Let me see if I can make this bigger. That is triggered or when an email arrives to a mailbox, right? So what mailbox? I can do it on my own mailbox if I wanted to, but one thing that we can do is to set up a generic mailbox. Say, for example, we have a mailbox like this. Let me go over here. It's called ADO at whatever is my domain. And the idea here is that if I am working on a project, I can easily go and take any of the emails that are in my inbox, say this, for example, and I can do and forward it, right? So and I can forward it to the ADO mailbox. And I can say, hey, please attach this email, whatever it is, to this work item. So I change the subject a little bit and include this prefix, right? ADO semicolon, and I follow it by the ID of the user story that I want that email to go to. Say, for example, this one, the one that we just created, right? User story number 16. So I'll go here to my email again, my inbox, and I say, hey, whenever you will receive this email, please go and attach it to the work item number 16. And I just say, forward this and send it. Okay. So how do I handle this? I will need to create a new flow that is triggered. Is triggered over here. Sorry. Oops, I lost it. Here, I use this trigger, right? When a new email arrives into a shared mailbox. And here I need to configure all of the properties of the trigger. For example, the recipient, what's the mailbox? I can include filters, right? Like when and how this, the type, if it contains attachments or doesn't have attachments, what folder in my inbox I want this to be triggered, right? And then with this in place, essentially this flow will be triggered whenever that ADO generic mailbox receives an email, right? That's only the first part. Next part is to try to figure out where do I want this email to be attached to, and I do that by going and reading the subject, right? And if I click here, I have a compose. And I have basically an expression here to go and try to read the subject and try to find a piece of text that I also have configured in here called the subject prefix. So basically anything in the subject that begins with ADO, semicolon, and 4 characters, right? I try to find it in the subject of the email. By the way, I can include this same wording in here, the same text as well, in the trigger itself. I think I have, I should have here some, yeah, here in the advanced parameters, I can go and select the subject, right? And if in the subject I do ADO, right, semicolon, that means that this flow will be triggered only when I have the ADO semicolon in the subject, this piece of text, and this will save me some executions. So if I wanted to do that, that's available there as well. So step number 1, go and extract the ADO ID from that subject. Step number 2, go and make sure that this flow, this work item, the ID that you read from that subject, it actually exists, right? So that's step number 2. And all I need to do is to go and do or call the get work item activity from the DevOps connector and pass that ID that I just found for the same project and organization where I'm currently working. And then I go and check, hey, it does actually exist. If yes, then I keep going. And what I try to do is to figure out what file name I should be using when I save this email, right? So usually what I do is to use the subject itself and use that as the file name of the message whenever I save it. Because what I want to do next is do exactly that. Go on and save the email I just received and create a file with it. That's what this activity is doing in the Outlook connector. So I'm saving the email. All this is doing is basically converting the email itself to a base 64 string. And then next, what I do is basically save it in the save it in the attachments of the work item. As you probably know already, every work item has this tab over here that allows you to add any attachment. So basically what I'm doing is saving that email and put it in here in the attachments, right? So if I go back to my flow, where was that? Over here. So I save it and I attach it in there. Unfortunately, there's no connector or activity. Sorry, there's no activity in the DevOps connector to save something as an attachment. But what we do have is, if I search here for ADO, all right, sorry, Azure DevOps, I have an action called send an HTTP request to Azure DevOps. Yeah. So here, all I need to do is to provide the URI, the URL of that endpoint and that action that I want to hit in the server, and pass the right parameters and forget about authentication and everything. And this action will take care of that. That's what I'm doing in here, right, to save that email. So there's no action in the connector to save attachments, but I have the API endpoint that I can call, passing the file name, and here in the body, I can pass the result of my previous action, which is the base 64 encoded email file, right? And the last step here is to link the two. So I saved an attachment, but this seems like the attachments in DevOps are saved somewhere in intermediate, right? And then you need to provide a link or create a link with that attachment and the work item itself. So what I'm doing here is, again, using the HTTP request activity, calling the endpoint and connecting the two, the saved attachment and the work item itself. So a little bit more complex than the previous flow that we created, but it's not the end of the world. Like, it's not the most complex flow ever. And how well does it work? Let's see it, right? So I went to my inbox, I created a new mail, I put it in the subject, I set the code in there. So I received this email with this subject, And what I am expecting now is that if I go to my flow again, where was that? Over here, and I go back, hopefully it didn't save anything. Yeah, I don't want to save anything. I should see a new execution in here. All right, so I can see how this was executed 6 minutes ago, and everything went well. So if I go and check now, that user story 16, I don't see anything, but if I refresh it, I can see how that email was saved in here, right? With this, with the subject of the email itself, and it was just added in here. And from here, I can do pretty much anything I want with it. I can reference it in the description, maybe just copying and pasting the link to it, yeah. So that's how we can do this, right? Again, this is just a simple example. We can even make it even more complex. In my company, what we do is, in addition to attaching the email in here, we take the summary, the kind of the first few lines of that email, and we paste them in the discussion section. So it is even easier to see what was included on that email or that decision, right? And that's something that we can leverage, and it is there for us to use, right? So that's the first part of this second example. The second part of this is basically, if I go back to my slides here, a small variation, right? So what can we do with this? Or how can we make it slightly better or worse, depending, right? So it's kind of annoying that in order to attach a mail to an Azure DevOps work item, I need to forward it to another shared mailbox. It's annoying, right? What if I had a function similar to what we have, for example, in Dataverse, right? With the Outlook integration, and I can just select an email and say track it. And by saying track this email, it automatically appears attached to my work item. How can we do this, right? So unfortunately, there's no functionality like that within the connectors, or there isn't anything that I could think of. But I thought about this trick, right? Which is essentially, what if I can pick any of those emails? Say, for example, this one, right? Entra ID, right? And I move it to a folder, for example, the ADO subfolder in my inbox. And from here, I do two things, right? Things number one, and I go and categorize it, use the labels, the categories, the labels that I have for all my emails to say, I want this email to be attached to this work request. And from here, I can do and say new category, right? And I can say ADO semicolon, same syntax as we used before, right? So ADO semicolon, and what was my user story number again? 16. Yeah. So if I go here, I can do 00, 16, 4 numbers to make sure the pattern is always there. And after tagging this with this category, I go and flag it. So we have the flag functionality in Outlook. So let's use it. So it turns out there is a trigger for Outlook for this event of flagging an email, right? There aren't many triggers for Outlook, but we have this one called when an item is when an email is flagged, right? So I think I should have somewhere here a flow. Yeah, here it is. So the flow, the trigger is very simple, right? So when an email is flagged in my inbox, and all I need to do here is configure again what's the mailbox. Let me show here all the parameters. What's the mailbox, and what's the folder, right? And I can start applying filters. The only filter that I actually applied here is the folder. So this flow doesn't get triggered every single time I flag an email, right? It is triggered when I flagged an email in the ADO folder. Okay, so and then it's very similar to the previous one. I need to go and retrieve the categories. There is no action in the Outlook connector to retrieve the categories of an email, but The good news is that we have in the Graph API, we have a method or an action to retrieve all the categories of a message. So I use this endpoint and I retrieve all the categories. And I go and filter, and I want to, what I'm doing here is give me only the ones that begin with ADO semicolon. I pick the first one. I could have multiple categories. I just pick the first one. And then I pretty much repeat what we saw on the previous flow, right? I go and check if this work item actually exists. I compose the file name using the subject of the email. I save it. I save it in DevOps, and then I link that attachment to the actual work item using the HTTP call from the ADO connector and calling or hitting this endpoint over here. And this, surprisingly or not so surprisingly, it works, right? So what I did here was essentially, let me go back to my inbox over here. I flag this email, I set the category, and if I go to this flow, email flagged, and I go back, hopefully nothing gets saved in here, and go and check, and I can see how it was actually executed 2 minutes ago, and it went well. So all I need to do now is go to this user story, go to the attachment. Actually, it is there already. So Entra ID Protection Weekly Digest, right? And that should be, yeah, this is the email that I flagged. And from here, I can just remove the flag if I wanted to, clear the flag, and even clear the categories if I need to, right? This flagging and categorizing is a trick that we use to be able to kick a flow in Power Automate and do all the work of saving this email and attaching it to a specific Azure DevOps work item. All right, so I'm running out of time. That's example number 2 out there. And let's move on to the next one. Okay. Similar to all the back and forth that we have with emails, right? We have similar requirements as well around documentation for my projects, right? So many times I need to keep a folder in SharePoint with all the documents related to my user stories. Organizing the folder structure for my projects is cumbersome. Usually there's no pattern. Everyone does whatever they want. Also, DevOps itself allows me to attach files to it the way we saw before. So I end up having files in 2 places, right? And it is complicated. So what if I can let SharePoint talk directly to DevOps and vice versa, so they can automatically handle this? And this is what this second example or the third example is about, right? How can I automate my document management both in SharePoint and in DevOps? So how do I do this? Let me go again to my maker. And what I want to do now is that whenever I create a new user story, right, I want Power Automate to go and create a folder for me somewhere, right? I already have this site created in which I have a folder called Azure DevOps, right? And what I want is to tell Power Automate, yeah, hey, dear Power Automate, please go and create a folder here for me with the ID of the DevOps work item. So everybody knows where to place the files related to that work item, and there's no confusion. Even more, what if I can tell Power Automate, please give me a link of this folder and place it in here in the DevOps itself, so everybody has easy access to it. How do we do that? So step number 1, go and add a field in the user story, right? That will contain that link to that SharePoint folder. So we do that by going here to the options in the user story. We have something called customizing here. So if I control click on this one, that will open the process customization page, right? And from here, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I can add fields to any user stories or actually any work items, right? So what I will do over here is come and say I want to create a new field. The first time you do this, you will probably want to create a new field, right? I already created a field for this, so I only need to pick it from the list of existing fields, right? But if you're doing this for the first time, just going here, create a new field and typing SharePoint folder, something like this, right? And instead of having it as a text, normal text, what I did was to set it up as multiple lines of text. And why did I set it up to multiple lines of text, you may be asking? Because this type of fields in the UI looks like this one, and it highlights any links, right? So if I do this .com, right, it shows us a link that I can actually click, right? So I prefer to have it as multiple lines of text so I can click on the link, right? So let me select here from the list of existing fields, SharePoint, I should have it somewhere here. If I don't find it, I will type it. Probably that's the best thing to do. SharePoint folder, click on add. It appears in here, but I would like to move it under here. And that's it. The new field is created there. I can close this window now. I'll close this too. And if I go and refresh this, hopefully, let me refresh the entire page. I can go and expand this and see my user stories, click on the user story 16, and I can see how I have the SharePoint folder field, right? Now I need the second part, which is to set up a flow that will handle this. When I create a user story, dear Power Automate, please go and create a folder for me in SharePoint and leave the link to it in here in this field, so I can come and click and make the document management of this user story more easy, right? So let me show you, because I already have the flow somewhere over here. I should have it over here. Maybe it's the first one. No. Second one. No. I will just go to my solution and find it here. So when a user story is created, right? I will edit in a new tab. When a user story is created, please, dear SharePoint, this dear Power Automate flow, go and create that folder in SharePoint for me. And this is a very simple flow as well. So we have the trigger. When a work item is created, I apply here the filter called user story. So whenever a new user story is created, I will initialize the SharePoint folder path. These are just variables to make the development easier. But the important action here is to compose, for example, the folder name, right? You probably noticed already that my folders have all the same length, so 4 characters. So I do that by applying basically a format number function to the ID itself, which only will have, it's numeric, right? So we'll only have a short number of characters, but I want to make them four characters in length. So I use this function over here. So I compose my folder name and I go and use the SharePoint connector this time. And I call the create folder action activity. And I call to my SharePoint site, my SharePoint library, and whatever folder, the root path folder, I want those folders to be created. And this is the output of the compose folder name. And then at the end, what I do is essentially come over here and say, please go and update this field in the work item that was just created and leave a link to it in that field, the new field that I just created. So if I go now, I create a new work item over here. I'll go to the feature and say, sorry, I am here in the feature. I click on the plus button, and this will allow me to say, I don't know, a Scottish Summit 2, right? That's a new user story. And I can just say, save it and see if that flow gets triggered or not. I should have it in here, go to the flow execution history. And if everything goes well, 4 seconds ago, actually, it was executed, triggered, and it ended up successfully. So I can go back to my user story and refresh this. And if everything goes well, I have a link now where I can click on it, and that will take me to my SharePoint folder. So, and I can start adding my files in here. Okay, so that's example number 3, right? 3.1, because what if I can take this one step further, right? And say, hey, Azure DevOps and SharePoint, do you want to talk together? And whenever I add a file to that SharePoint folder that we just created, what if you copy that and put it in DevOps instead, and maybe delete the old one or do whatever you want with it, right? That's an alternative to this same example. So it's very simple now, but at this point, probably you already figured it out, right? But the idea is that we create a Power Automate flow that is triggered on creation of a new file. So whenever I upload a file in here, let me pick up an example, right? I will go and pick whatever files I made in here. I have an image. I'll drag and drop it over here, and that will create a new JPG file that was added to this folder for the DevOps work item number 17. So if I go back now to my work item user story, in this case, number 17, and I refresh this, after a while, I should see, first of all, the flow being executed. So what's that flow looks like? That would be SharePoint. When a new file is created in SharePoint, let me edit this and show it very quickly because I'm running out of time. So the trigger is, as I mentioned before, it will be when a new file was added to a SharePoint folder, and what I need to do is essentially repeat what we saw before. I try to get the ADO ID from the folder name this time, from the path, right? I go and check if the work item exists. If it exists, I compose its file name. I get the file content this time. I save it in DevOps through the HTTP connector or activity or action. And then I link the two. I link the attachment with the work item itself. And if I go to the history of execution of this flow and everything went well, this is running, right? And I refresh it, and it ended up successfully 4 seconds ago. And if I go now to my DevOps instance and I refresh this, I see how that image was added from SharePoint directly to DevOps, right? So yeah, so that's how this automation can help me keeping the two worlds connected, right? And that's pretty much what I have for today, right? Is literally just a few tiny little examples of what can be done, right? There's so much more, right? DevOps is a fantastic tool. There are so many features included that have so much potential to improve the quality of the projects we deliver. But it's also very generic because it has to suit kind of a wide variety of project types, right? So in order to really adapt it to our needs, we need to use the built-in extensibility. So if we combine the extensibility of DevOps itself, plus the other tools in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, and we connect the two worlds, we can definitely leverage our productivity, which is what it's all about, right? Again, as I was saying, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more we can do. Just to mention a couple of examples that I would take way longer to explain and to show, but what if we create a Canvas app to simplify the UI, right? Or what if we use Power BI to create beautiful reports about the progress we are making in Azure DevOps? Or maybe use the skills that we have available in Copilot Studio, right? And use the techniques we learned today to expose those functions in DevOps through Power Automate to the copilots that we are creating. So the sky is the limit. I hope these examples spark your curiosity and your willingness to learn. Really, really big thank you to you all for your time and attention. Thanks to the sponsors again, without whom none of this event would be possible. And last but not least, to the organizers and volunteers and the rest of speakers who put a massive amount of work and personal time to be able to enjoy this event, and all for free nonetheless. So big thank you to everybody. Feel free to contact me if you want to know more about these topics, or even if you want the examples. I'm more than happy to share them with you. And I hope we meet soon again. Thank you very much.